going to happen now, but my student.
I can't see what you see now, so when I look up at you and the camera so that you can see me, I just see lovely pictures of you, so it's lovely. But just in case you're wondering where I disappeared to, the podium is actually over to that way. And so I'm going to go over and I'll click through the slides for you, Marty. But I think we'll maybe go ahead and get started because I know it's a tight time frame this morning to then get some really good conversations going. Just to give you a quick orientation of who's in the room. I think you're seeing the room, are you not? Excellent.
I can, yeah, a few people. We can't see I can't see the whole room, but okay. I can see a few people.
So we have
now there's panning going on.
Oh, good. See, Dave, it's like now I can't see what Dave's doing, but he's doing something. So we have our current Masters of Arts in Learning and Technology students here on campus. So they're in their residency. This is their second week. This is day 2 in their second week. So they are tired, but they are very excited, but they're tired. Is that fair? Yes. We also have Stu Berry, who I know Marty knows, here. And Carrie was
Hi,
here. Did
Stu.
I lose Carrie? Okay, and Carrie's here as well. Welcome, welcome. It's okay. We're just getting started. And for those on the live stream who are joining us, so just to explain a little bit for folks who are just coming in, Marty is coming to us from Okotoks, Alberta. Roland is coming to us from Oshawa. And we also have folks on the live stream. So if everyone wants to turn around and wave at the camera above the clock, or the one over there, and say hello, there will be people logging in. And the people that are logging in will be MALAT learners that are currently in their online program. They may be MALAT learners from last year, so they're starting in their second year. Or they may also be members of the Royal Roads community. So we've opened it up to everybody in this community as well to come and be part, either by the live stream or to come face to face. And then last point of logistics before I stop talking, Marlene at the back is going to be monitoring the chat in the live stream. So while people are watching this, if they have questions, they'll type it in the chat, and Marlene gets to be their arm in the room and say, Elizabeth, stop talking. I have a question from the floor on the online side. So without further ado, Marty, I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself, if you're all right doing that quickly, and we'll let you just jump right in, and I'll have to step out of the way, thankfully, and manage the PowerPoint. So you can just let me know when to advance the slides. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to assume that you can hear me, that I'm loud enough, but not too loud, unless someone waves and gives me the indication otherwise.
You sound great.
And let's see my screen. Okay, thank you. My screen keeps flipping over to a wonderful picture of Roland, who's looking very thoughtful, but I want to stay on my slides. So, all right, I will start by telling you a little bit about myself. I don't want to take up too much time doing that. I am currently professor and chair in the Center for Distance Education at Athabasca University. And just to give you perhaps a clearer idea of what it is we do in my center, I will tell you that we have applied for a name change, and we will become the Center for Education, Innovation, and Research. I also spend about a third of my time in support of KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden, from which I do the same kind of work, but Athabasca shared a bit of my time over there so that we could push out Athabasca's mandate to increase access and improve the quality of education for everyone, everywhere, across the world. I am an education advocate and perhaps a critic. I would argue that my research focuses on what humans are doing, particularly in this technologically enabled education environment, and how it is we can offer more accessibility, higher quality, better engagement, and so on in this world. So how does that relate to the community of inquiry? Well, we believe that this particular framework provides a new opportunity to look at the teaching and learning transaction in higher education in particular, but it is also now being applied in many different places. And there, thank you, Elizabeth, for changing the slide. There is the best colored version of the model that we have to offer at the moment. It is animated. If you go, let's see, that's the you have the URL at the bottom. If you go to that URL, you will be able to see the elements of this taxonomy animated, so that it has some animation so that you can see some of what is at work as this taxonomy comes together. The model was created by Randy Garrison, Terry Anderson, and Walter Archer in the late 1990s, and was actually published as a taxonomy. I'm trying to be very careful not to call it a theory, because we don't quite have all of the relationships within this taxonomy fully explored yet. So we're not able to call it a theory at this time. It is a heuristic device to what was originally thought would be a way to carve up the most critical elements in an online text-based environment. Now, I'm making some assumptions about how much you know about the community of inquiry model. And because in such a short presentation where I can only come in and go out quickly again, I have to make some assumptions about what it is you know about this model already. Let's very quickly go over the key elements in the model. Just before we switch slides, though, I want to say again that the model's been in play, if you will, since 2000, and it has thousands of citations and hundreds of applications. I'm involved in the model because as Randy, Terry, and Walter were creating the model, Randy and I had a major Canadian SSHRC grant to study the adjustments that humans were making, moving from teaching and learning in the face-to-face environment to doing so in an online environment. So since the model emerged, it's been part of my research program, my practice, and very much part of my teaching as well. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, I won't sure I read properly from this. I'm going to go to my slide. So underneath this model are a lot of assumptions. And the first thing I want to tell you is that it's based on notions of community and learning, which have there are foundations, of course, in adult ed and in social learning theory and so on. The idea of a community of inquiry actually didn't emerge from the online world. It came from others. So Pierce, Royce, and Dewey all are are researchers and theorists, philosophers who identified communities as a valuable, I won't say the only place, but as a valuable place for the advancement of knowledge. Matthew Lippmann was the first to talk about the importance of a community of inquiry where the objective is critical reflection through intellectual autonomy. And however, through that intellectual autonomy, the irony is that critical reflection is social and communal. In fact, if you read what Peter Jarvis says about adult learning and the social environment, he says, learning often doesn't solidify until someone else says, oh yeah, that's cool, or that's right, or I see it this way. So dialogue, the social environment, and the community are critical to Garrison, etc.'s model, and is foundational in the work of other educators. Okay, next slide, please. How much can we say about John Dewey? I always include, because it depends on, I have multiple audiences I have to talk to, but it's interesting to go back to what Dewey said and look at all the challenges we're faced with in education at the moment. He identified a stupendous category mistake, we say, that we confused refined finished products of inquiry with the raw, crude subject matter. So really, in effect, what he's saying, which I hope you'll be talking about in your work on learning theory, is that we haven't always made clear where we're talking about learning as a verb and a process and action, things that we do to create learning and to engage in learning ourselves as students, and learning as an outcome, the final product. How, let's see, my Psychology 201 learning theory course taught us the definition that learning occurs where there's a more or less permanent change in knowledge, behavior, or attitude. So in the community of inquiry model, there is a significant focus on the process. What are the humans doing in this model? Okay, I better speed up a little here. Here's an advertisement for our website. Athabasca is now responsible for the repository for the research for the CoI model, and wants, of course, to engage practitioners in a discussion there. So the URL is on that first slide. I don't know if you can see it here, but we invite you to join us to talk more about the CoI and the press. All right, let's talk about elements. And next slide, please. You should be on the slide that says 3 presences. Let's see, where are you? I'm over on my own slides. Okay. Central to this, to the online community of inquiry model are notions right now of 3 presences. One is social presence, where we endeavor to foster open communication, group cohesion, and personal affective engagement and learning. And I give some examples of indicators there. Cognitive presence is defined using what's called a practical inquiry model, and is based on a 4-stage process model where there is a trigger, there's the opportunity to explore the concepts, to integrate, and then to come to some manner of resolution over what's been learned. Some sort of temporary agreement, if you will, at least for the individual student, that what they've learned is appropriate. And finally, teaching presence. I hope that we get time to talk a lot about teaching presence. In the community of inquiry model, it does not say teacher presence. And teaching presence based on a constructed social learning underpinning believes that all this data we have on how important peer learning is becomes part of the model. So the instruct record the teacher who's responsible for the course also in this model has the responsibility to link the students together, have them working together and teaching each other as appropriate and with guidance, of course, and monitoring so that they don't lead each other astray. That's a critical piece, and we're doing some significant research on that at the moment that if we have time, I'll be able to tell you a little more about. So I'm going to ask you, Elizabeth, if you can tell me again when you want me to stop for questions. How much time do I have?
Marti, I think if we could take maybe another 5 minutes and then we'll open the floor for questions so we have some time for questions and we're not rushing for 2 minutes at the end.
Okay, so I'm going to show you these slides and suggest that based on your interest and your available time, that you take a closer look at these. I define social presence again, and then the next slide, Elizabeth, is actually, I've given you some examples of some research findings about social presence. I've done the same for cognitive presence. On the next slide, and the slide after that is again some research findings. And then finally, teaching presence, which is where I spend a significant amount of my research time these days. And then slide 12 is some more research findings. Norm Vaughan and I, with Randy Garrison, wrote a book recently that explicates the model for blended learning environments. So over the time that this taxonomy has been at play, a lot of things have happened. It's now being used for K-12 environments, not just higher ed. It's now being used for blended learning environments. And we had so many requests to talk about how you actually operationalize this for instructional design and teaching that we wrote this small book. It is available free through Athabasca University. Through the AU Press, which is an open source press. The next slide gives you some sense of how much this model is being used. I have a Google alert and I get regular. Let me see if I can estimate. On average, about 5 citations a week that come, people who are using this. We've put the model to use in a number of environments. We have what's called the BOLT program in the Center for Distance Education at the moment. It's a blended and online learning and teaching professional development program. We've created a community of inquiry for K-12 teachers who are in practice to come in and take modules with us to learn about blended and online learning and teaching. We've used the community of inquiry to teach about the community of inquiry. We've also used the model to run, I'm sorry, next slide, Elizabeth. Which slide are we on now? I just talked about BOLT. So
there we go.
That is slide 15. Okay. And now you can go to slide 16. Athabasca University runs a MOOC for a public audience. We don't advocate MOOCs for higher education, but we do advocate for MOOCs for public education. And Athabasca runs a MOOC called Learning to Learn Online. And again, I've given you a link if you want to know more about that particular MOOC. And we've used a community of inquiry adjusted model in that environment so that we can again get high engagement and a lot of interaction among the participants using the community of inquiry model and teaching them about it as well as an opportunity for them to reflect on their own learning. And then finally, when I'm in Sweden, at KTH and other places that in Europe that invite me to come, we teach a course called Teaching Strategies and Design for Online and Blended Learning, where we again create communities of inquiry through blended environments in order to teach faculty and instructors in higher ed about this model and having it become a heuristic. I'm going to say that again because I don't want to suggest that it's a perfect model. Uh, um, there is no such thing, but it's a great opportunity for discussion and the shaping of design and giving teachers the opportunity to know what kinds of things to do. We've also, in fact, I could have put another slide up here. Well, there's many places where it's being applied, but the Open University of China has also declared a need for information about the community of inquiry. Our book has just been translated into Mandarin, and I've started doing presentations like this to the teachers at the Open University of China to have the same kind of discussion. So I feel like that was really a very fast globetrot pointing to different things in the model. So I'll stop there now. At least I can hear your questions and get a little more specific and pointed about the things that you would like to know.
Much, Marti. I know it's such a whirlwind in these short time frames, but I'm hoping that we can maybe open the floor to some questions, and then I can pop back to different slides if you'd like to see what some of the other slides we're speaking of, or you have a question around them. So, anyone like to take the first question? I'm just going to pass the mic over here.
Oh, hello. I just had a question about the model and setting climate, and I wonder if you could talk to what does it mean to set climate.
That's a wonderful question. And those overlaps in the model that you're referring to, I'm going to go over to my slides here so I can speak specifically to it. We are just seeing some really interesting and valuable research being done to start to look at these overlaps. I also have some research that we've done using structural equation modeling to look at some of the relationships among the presences. Okay, so setting climate means that it's, as is true with all good adult education theory, and of course valuable in classrooms when you bring a group of children together, that it's critical that you have created a healthy social environment. So how is it that you set climate in an online community of inquiry? Well, we know there is a dynamic. We have data now that shows us there's a dynamic in the development of this online community of inquiry. Acul and Garrison have some good data on this if you're interested in the citation. Social presence, the settling of the social presence issues is the first order of the day. So in setting climate, what I can tell you very specifically what I do is I teach the students, first of all, about the community of inquiry model. I spend some time in the forums and in whatever synchronous forum we're using to tell them about the model and the design that we've used. We together as a community that's coming together set the rules for operating in our group so that group cohesion is primed, if you will. Group cohesion is one of the critical elements of social presence, and but it doesn't just happen. You have to provide exercises and direction so the group can cohese, which means the elements come together and connect to one another. The overlap on teaching presence is there because in the setting of the climate, the teacher does have a particular role to play, and that in the early stages through the social presence is to be socially available and aware. My PhD research was about social and academic interaction between students and faculty. And one of the things that faculty often don't do is present themselves as a real human being, a real person with children and activities and hobbies and all of that kind of thing. So again, in setting the climate, you are priming your teaching presence by getting the group to cohese so that they are ready to start teaching each other and to present yourself as well as a critical element in that group cohesion, that you too are part of the social environment.
Thanks, Marti. And I know Marlene is polling the folks on the live stream. If they have any questions, please just drop them in the chat and we'll raise them. But others in the room, Satish.
If I understand correctly, you suggested that you wouldn't recommend using MOOCs for higher education. May I know, do you have a reason for that, if you may?
It would probably take us a really long time to go through this, but I can tell you, and again, offline, if you wanted to have the discussion, I can tell you what our concern is at Athabasca about some types of MOOCs. So we believe that higher education is a critical experience of learning, growth, and development, as well as amassing content knowledge. And our significant criticism of MOOCs is that the opportunity to help people grow and develop as human beings, as learners, etc., are not always so readily available in a MOOC environment. So we wouldn't support them in higher education. The other thing that we know from this whole MOOC experiment is that the people who are successfully, if I can use that weasel word, who are actively engaging in MOOCs and seeing them to completion, are people who are educated already. So our other argument is that we are setting those who may have been disenfranchised earlier in the education environment, we're setting them up to fail because there isn't enough scaffolding, enough support, enough opportunity for that individual development. So we criticize MOOCs as massive content presentation, which is not necessarily a bad thing as long as you aren't equating it to the kind of rich experience you get in a higher education environment. And I'll stop there, but there's so many more things to say. And it's not that I don't support the MOOC movement. I do, as long as it's, but I am often critical if it's being suggested that a MOOC can replace higher education. It can augment, it can draw more people in perhaps, but it's a long way from a replacement.
Thank you, Marti. Other questions? Ponderings? Just to mention, the slide deck will be put in your course shell, so don't worry. You'll have the slide deck, you'll have the web links, you'll have all of those good things.
Hi there. I was wondering if you could explain to us a little bit more about the social, supporting the discourse. You could talk a bit about that.
Okay. Going back to my slides again here. So underneath the community of inquiry model is the notion that dialogue, that engagement, interaction is a significant and valuable piece of a teaching and learning transaction. So in order for interaction that supports learning to occur, it has to, one, be focused on the content at hand and be managed in such a way that there's the opportunity for a developmental process. So in order to support discourse, you have to have a healthy communal learning environment, which is on the social side. There has to be open communication so that there is no fear for people in sharing what they're thinking. And on the cognitive presence side, there has to be a process. You need to be able to look at each other and, as the teacher, look at what the students are doing and say, where are they? And I can tell you, again, from all the research that's been done on this, there's a lot of time in these rich communicative online environments. There's a lot of time spent on exploring. And so the participants, if I can put it this way, of course, it depends on who you're working with. This is easier to do when I'm teaching faculty than it is if I'm teaching pre-service teachers. You have to be able to help the participants get out of exploration and begin to integrate by using the appropriate questions, asking for particular exercises, and at the very end, even using debating environments so that you can take a stand. And we use Perry's committed relativism, which is the notion that you don't have to be exactly right, but you have to take a position and defend that position from your perspective with respect and understanding that other people will see things in a different way. I just want to add too that you can hear in what I'm saying that I'm talking very much on the social science side, and we also have this debate a lot. This is a different kind of process than if you're teaching physics, where there are some key principles that have to be learned, and then there won't be quite as much committed relativism, although maybe there should be. There will be things that the students have to learn and have to demonstrate that they know. So their resolution in that case, in the supporting discourse, would be them demonstrating the knowledge that they have and that they have come to understand clearly what's going on.
Thank you.
I'll stop there. You're welcome.
That notion of the debate really resonated with the group, Marti, because they're right in the middle of their debate assignment. So one round was yesterday and the next round's this afternoon. So those on the live stream who were in residency last year or who are doing the online program as well have been through the debate experience as well. So I'm sure that really resonated with you. Any other questions? I have one, but I'm holding it in my back pocket because it's more important that you have a chance to speak. All right, I'll pull mine out then, and we'll see if it spurs another. And so I guess it's actually two questions in one. I'll start with the first one. I'm interested to hear, based on where you're presenting and when you're working with faculty in Europe and now in China, what are some of the common, I don't know that I would say criticisms, but common hurdles for uptake? So when they're hearing and experiencing this model for the first time that may run very counter to their beliefs about how teaching and learning work, what do you see are you seeing some common hurdles that people go through or challenges that they wrestle with as they start to incorporate and apply it?
That's a really good question. And we are, there's lots of work still to be done on this transition, if you will, to the extent that it's really going to happen. Certainly, the transition that I'm talking about is the move away from transmission-based delivery to more engagement, constructivism, etc. So from my experience in Europe, and I really only have one window to talk about, but we are often going in now and dealing with mandated learners, right? So these are faculty who, for example, have to take a certain number of professional development opportunities in order to get tenure, or they've been required to teach it. So that just in itself flavors what we're doing. We talk initially about how student demographics are changing, how things in the world are changing, society is changing. We are economically fettered by our new need to connect with one another. There are all of these other kinds of social issues going on. And we talk about how it is that have them talk, and of course we say things too, about how it is students need to be prepared in order to manage this extraordinarily complex world. And so when we start from that point of view, then the idea of changing what we're doing in the teaching and learning transaction makes more sense. It's not just because we think this is, hey, kind of a cool idea and we thought we'd try things differently. No, this is really serious applications of what we believe is a new way to prepare the participants in higher education and any kind of education, in fact, to be more autonomous, to understand learning better, to be well versed in the process of learning. I wrote, I don't know, well, actually 11 years ago now, an article that just won an award. 11 years. It just won an award for the argument that we made that teaching about learning should be part of the curriculum everywhere for credit. We wrote about that 11 years ago, and it's just now starting to get some rubber. So I guess my point to you, it's a very good question. My point to you is that there's an educative process that's going on along with this about education and what we need to do things differently. So I'll just say finally that I think it's easier in Europe. Can I put it that way? I work with a scholar from China. She's an education professor from Beijing Normal University. And she does the translating and she makes the connections with the students. They are, of course, very with the students who are instructors. The instructors are worried about how the students will, in higher education, will be able to give up that notion that the instructor is on the high chair, right? That the instructor is the god of all knowledge or goddess of all knowledge, and you don't do anything but try and figure out what they want you to do and learn what they are teaching you. So that, of course, probably goes without saying, that's the hardest part. But I can certainly the Chinese university movement is all about this, increasing access and helping students become their own learning advocates. So the organization itself is a great place for us to start. We'll see how it goes if we're into more traditional and place-based institutions.
Thank you very much, Marti. We have time for one more question. Is there anything on our live stream or anyone here who has a burning question for Marti? Now that you know where to find her, you can always email her, but you have her captive in Okotoks right now.
I was wondering how teaching about learning fits in with your model. Where would you put it in your model? Would it be in the regulating learning area, do you think?
Well, it certainly rests right in the center. It's a very good question and one that has come up before. Certainly right in the center in creating the educative experience is if we want that to happen in its fullest form, the students, participants, whoever they are, they need to understand more about education, about teaching and learning. So at the moment in our practice, the idea about teaching and learning comes in the early stages. So it comes, as I said earlier, in the setting climate, because we don't feel like we can make the whole thing coalesce and come together if they aren't clear and understanding and have an explicit view of what it is we're trying to accomplish. So that's where it is for us at the moment, but we'd certainly be interested in any suggestions on where else we would put it. I would argue it has to be in the beginning, and we know about the dynamic now that social presence is where the participants want to spend their time in the beginning, understandably, and so we put it in there so it becomes part of what we're doing throughout the entire community of learning process.
Thank you very much, Marti. I think it's one of the things that we're really interested in, of course, here, but this group in particular, as they get ready when they leave their residency on Friday and they have a post-res online, just this group, and then they start their third course with the fully blended or the fully online folks. So 2 different groups coming together. And so there's been lots of questions and pondering and contemplation about what's it going to be like now that we're this cozy group to stretch out and meet new people and build on the experience and make those social connections? So I think I'm seeing a lot of faces in the room as you're talking going, yes, I'm going to have to remember this. So we'd like to thank you very, very much. I know it was an extremely short time frame to run through a whole model, but maybe a big thank you to Marti. And we have, it doesn't look like this, but there's a lovely electronic thin version of something in this bag that's coming your way as a thank you, because we couldn't figure out a way to, toss it in your direction. So look for something in your email. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you. Good luck.
Take care. For next time. So folks on the live stream, we're just going to take about a 5-minute break just to reconnect and get Roland up and running in a different software system. And then folks in the room, if you'd like to stretch, take a break, use the facilities, and we'll come back probably 10 to the hour. So we'll see you then.